session, I have a few pointers to ensure you get the best from the session. So please keep your microphone on mute at all times, unless you're a speaker. And we recommend you put your screen into speaker view. You can do this by clicking the view button in the top right-hand corner and choosing speaker view. Should you have any questions, please put them in the chat box. They'll be picked up by our moderator and chair as we go along. And lastly, for your information, we are recording this session, which will be sent out to all delegates. Now to proceed, and I'm delighted to hand over to our chair for today's session, Tim Williams, former CEO of the Welsh Automotive Forum. Over to you, Tim.
Many thanks, Janice, and good afternoon, everyone. Prynhawn da, croeso I chi gyd. Thanks, everyone, for joining us this afternoon as we discuss the UK-EU transition and the impact of the trade agreement. We will hear how Welsh Government are working on implementation of the agreement, a view from industry, what's going on with logistics, some key points of interest, including rules of origin, data management, labelling, business travel, working with the island of Ireland, and how Welsh Government is looking at both current and future support for industry. So well done, Janice, in bringing together such an expert panel for us this afternoon. We have Ed Sheriff, Welsh Government Deputy Director EU Transition. Ed has stepped in last minute to replace Emma, who was going to be with us but now can't. So Ed, thanks very much for stepping in last minute for us. We have James Davis, the Chief Executive Officer of Industry Wales. Chris Yarsley, Policy Manager, Logistics UK. Richard Rumbelow, Director of International Affairs and Export Services, Make UK. And Dickie Davis, OBE, Welsh Government Deputy Director, Industrial Transformation Division. So as we go through the presentations, please use the chat facility to post your questions for the panel, Q&A that follows the presentations. So let's get underway, and we'll start with Ed Sheriff from Welsh Government. Ed, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim, and good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here and give you some of the view from the Welsh Government centrally in terms of our coordination of work across the government and working with the UK government on implementing the Trade and Cooperation Agreement. I've got some slides which are they're just being shown there. So if I just move on to the first slide, I just wanted to set a bit of context just in terms of the timing and some of the complications that arose as a result of that. We all know that the negotiations continued right up until the 11th hour, with a deal only being agreed on Christmas Eve, some 7 days before the end of the transition period. And this obviously posed as some considerable challenges in terms of trying to make sure that society in Wales were prepared for the significant changes that were going to result out of the deal. We knew from the approach that the UK government was taking in terms of taking the UK out of the single market and customs union, that there'll be some significant changes in terms of the business and trading environment with the EU, and also changes to the the movement of people and wider security arrangements. So prior to the agreement being reached, we set out some of our key end of transition actions in the end of transition action plan, and on the following slide, we list there the kind of 5 key priorities that were set out in that end transition action plan, which really highlighted some of those key actions that we were taking and encouraging individuals, businesses, and society to take with the view of the significant changes that we were expecting at the end of that transition period. So that plan that we published back on the 12th of November put us in a pretty good a position as we possibly could be to try and anticipate some of those changes, some of those new requirements that were going to come in at the start of the new year. And just picking up on the business readiness theme highlighted there, there was a lot of activity that we coordinated to try and support businesses with some of the changes that we knew that were coming. So we knew that by leaving the customs union single market, this was going to create some additional requirements for businesses in the way that they trade with the EU, additional requirements in terms of paperwork and documentation, the requirement to get an EROI number and elements like that, but also some of the big risks that we saw materializing from the future relationship. And some of those covered things like data flows. So we knew that there were the EU would need to grant the UK data adequacy for data to continue to flow across borders between the UK and the EU. So we were working really hard in that end of transition period leading up to the significant changes that were coming to try and prepare businesses in Wales as best as we could for those changes. But we obviously knew that one of the biggest constraints that we had is that we didn't know what the exact trading relationship was going to be. So that even at that point, there were lots of significant unknowns that we just couldn't really prepare for. So it's a case of really operating with as much information as we could to try and help businesses navigate through the changes that we knew were going to come up, then also prepare for some significant changes that we're now seeing as we're moving into the new year and onto the new relationship. If we just move on to the next slide, so I'm just going to focus now in terms of some of the activities that we did immediately after the agreement was reached. So our first task, which really focuses on that kind of business readiness piece that I just described, was really updating the resources that we had available for businesses to utilize. So between Christmas and the New Year, there's an extensive program of work updating our Preparing Wales websites, the EU transition portal, and really working with the UK government as much as we could to signpost the key information for businesses to make sure that there was an online resource there to try and explain the changes that were coming through the agreement and where further information could be sought. So there's a lot of activity in those early periods leading up to the end of the year and into the new year to really make sure that businesses had access to the guidance and information that was required to navigate through some of these changes. Our focus then into the new year was really that management of the immediate day one and week one implications. So before we began into the new year, we had extensive traffic management plans in place across the main ports within Wales. So plans around counterflow arrangements on the A55, stacking arrangements for ports in South West Wales. So we're trying to make sure that as we moved into the new arrangements that we could make sure these was as smooth as possible with some mitigations that we could put in place for the day one preparations. And then throughout the early part of the new year, we're working as closely as we could do with the UK government to try and iron out some of those immediate problems that we were seeing as a result of the changes that came in the new year. And a key example of this was some of the work that we tried to do with the UK government and the Irish authorities and businesses to try and smooth out some of the issues around the information and documentation requirements for goods moving between Wales and the UK and the Republic of Ireland and into Northern Ireland. So we gathered a group of industry representatives, the governments of Ireland and the UK government and ourselves to really try and work through some of those immediate day one and week one implications. So where we had the opportunity to try and influence and make those arrangements move more smoothly, we had the opportunity and we made sure that we could broker some of these meetings and engagement events to try and make sure that some of those immediate impacts could be ironed out. The final area that we focused on post the agreement is really analysing the trading cooperation agreement and what that meant for Wales. So it's a 1,400-page legal document. There's a series of associated agreements and political declarations associated with that. So we spent the first 6 to 8 weeks really analysing the deal and setting out what those main practical implications are to citizens, businesses and communities in Wales. And on the 12th of February, we published the document which is on that link there, the new relationship with the EU and what it means for Wales, which really tries to set out those practical implications and do that in an objective way as possible. Because although ministers clearly weren't in favour of the kind of deal which the UK government negotiated, clearly any deal was better than the consequences of a no deal outcome. And the priority for Welsh ministers and the Welsh government was really trying to support citizens, businesses and communities in Wales to navigate through those changes. So we published that document a few weeks ago now, which we hope is a useful guide to try and help citizens, businesses and communities through the changes that we're seeing as part of the new relationship. And in the coming days, we're looking to publish a more detailed implications document for what that means for businesses. We're very much aware that a lot of the changes that come about are those which impact on businesses, those looking to trade in goods and services, but also the movement of people into the EU. So we're looking to publish a document in the coming days which sets out a bit more detail about what those implications are for businesses in Wales. So those were the three main priority groups that we were focusing on immediately after the agreement. And my final slide just picks up some of those longer term actions that we're working on now. And the first one is it kind of links to what I was talking about earlier, and really trying to iron out some of the difficulties that we're seeing as a result of the agreement, because the reality is that this is the agreements that are going to be in place now for the medium to long term. We know there are some issues that we're seeing on the ground, which you'll hear later on with some of the other panel members that are talking this afternoon. But it is the reality, it is the consequence of the agreement that has been signed. And what our role is really trying to work within the constraints of the agreement that we have to knock the corners off, to try and make things work as smoothly as we can. So that's some of the work that we're focusing on now, and really working positively with the UK government on these. And some of those examples that we've been working on in recent weeks and months is trying to make sure that member states apply a consistent set of rules in the application of the requirements for goods moving between the UK and the EU. We've heard a lot from businesses in Wales and across the UK about inconsistent approaches depending on where goods are landing at their destination point. And we've been using the evidence and examples that we're receiving in Wales to try and inform a UK-wide approach to then try and influence other EU member states in terms of making sure there's a consistency in the application of the rules that are required. We've also been working closely with the UK government and the Department for Agriculture in particular around the issue around mixed loads. So this has been a consistent problem in the movement of goods, of those those loads which are a combination of various goods, which previously would just move frictionless across the border, but now require some really significant additional checks and processes on those. So we've been working in collaboration with the UK government to again trying to iron out some of those issues and make sure that Wales's voice is heard in those discussions with the UK and the EU to try and iron those out. And then we've also been working on a cross-government, cross-UK basis on some of those really key forward-looking priorities for the economy in Wales and across the UK. So in recent weeks, we've been focusing on the kind of export assistance that can be available to businesses across the UK, and making sure that whether you're located in Wales or in England, that you're getting the best possible access to the export support, be that from the Welsh Government through our recently published Export Action Plan, but also that support and advice that's available from the UK Government. And we've also been working on some specific sector issues that have arisen as a result of the agreement, most recently difficulties in terms of the movement in the cultural and creative sectors, both the movement of people and goods. So we're working really closely with the UK government to, like I say, trying to smooth the implementation of the agreement wherever possible, using the levers and the tools that we have available to us. Another key priority for us is actually making sure that we are appropriately represented in the longer term implementation arrangements. So the Trade and Cooperation Agreement sets out quite a deep and complex governance structure for how the agreement is going to be implemented, and how the UK and the EU are going to work together to try and implement the agreement as set out in the document. And we've been arguing with the UK government that it's absolutely crucial that the voice from Wales is heard and represented in those structures. So as the UK and the EU are working constructively to work through some of those issues, that our voice is heard and that the Welsh Government is appropriately represented in some of those structures. So there's some really important specialised trade committees in areas like goods, services, sanitary and phytosanitary checks, for example, some of those really detailed, complicated issues that will have to be discussed between the UK and the EU. We're fighting hard to make sure that Wales's voice is heard and we're represented in those structures. And then the final point is just really making sure that we're identifying those priorities for those elements in the agreement where there's scope for further negotiation. And one of those key ones within the business space is around the mutual recognition of professional qualifications. So the agreement sets a framework for how this mutual recognition process could operate in the future, where if you're a qualified lawyer in the UK, for example, your qualification will automatically be recognised in member states for you to operate your legal services to businesses in those member states. We're working with the UK government to really identify some of those key priorities for those areas in the agreement where there's scope for further negotiation. And then finally, I'm just going to highlight some of the big Welsh Government operational responsibilities that we're that we're currently working on at the moment. So one of the big areas is around the border infrastructure requirements that we needed in some of our EU-facing ports in Wales. So we're working collaboratively with local government and stakeholders around key sites for border control points around Holyhead and the ports in Southwest Wales. So we need to get the infrastructure in place for the import controls, which are going to be phased in over the course of this year. We're also working on the processes and checks that are going to be required as part of the phasing in of those import controls in terms of the sanitary and phytosanitary checks that are required on those goods that are going to be coming into the UK. And we're also working on some of the new areas where we've got additional policy flexibility as a result of leaving the EU. So some of those priorities that we're working on right now cover areas such as procurement and also the replacements of the EU state aid rules in terms of how the UK subsidy regime operates. So there's an awful lot of work going on. That summarizes some of our priorities in terms of the central position from the EU transition perspective. You'll hear more from Dickie and colleagues about some of the particular focuses in the manufacturing sector, but I hope that helps in terms of giving you the flavour of what we're coordinating, what we're focusing on from that central EU transition perspective.
Well, Ed, many thanks indeed. Not only for stepping in last minute, but also an excellent presentation, a huge, complicated, complex situation you're dealing with. And I think, we appreciate the extent of all that work that has to go in. This is something new for everybody. And I think we're all grateful for people like yourselves and the teams who are getting to grips with the wording, because it's all about the wording and the legalese of how we put this into action. So Ed, thanks very much. And I'm sure there'll be questions. I've seen a couple of things come through on the chat already. So I'm sure stand by for questions later on, but thank you very much indeed. So what's the view from industry in response really as to where we are in this? So very pleased to welcome James Davis. James is Chief Exec of Industry Wales. So James, what's the industry perspective, please?
Thanks, Tim, and thanks to Make UK for the opportunity today. I think it's probably worth bearing the fact that I've been in Industry Wales for 3 years, but prior to that, for 32 years, I worked in the manufacturing industry, first happily in R&D, and then unfortunately in the commercial and operations world in the UK, EU, but also exporting outside the EU and international business in Far East. So I'm going to come from this today and not talk about all the problems a minute, but how we can focus our voice to ensure that we deal with some of the issues that we're facing, both in the short term, medium term, and the long term. And that is not at any point to say what we're facing at the moment in the short term is unimportant versus the longer term or the strategic issues or structural issues that we'll face in the near future. They're clearly very important. The cost of transportation, the availability of transportation, the delays in the timelines are significant operational issues right now that we have to ensure that we are working on. But I also want to take a little time to recognize that we have 3 levels of issue within this trade agreement, and some of them are becoming more apparent as being structural or long-term rather than being things that we need to settle down based on confusion or inconsistency of application of rules, as important as they are today. And it's a plea really from behalf of the industry that we are very clear on recognizing these type of issues, because the solutions by which we need to come to and the parties that bring those solutions have to be very discreet as well, or very specific in that area itself. And my favorite sentence at the moment about the complexity of it all is a sentence that goes, "There are now complex rules of origin requirements that exclude third-party content from the bilateral accumulation agreement between the EU and the UK." And instantly 50% of you completely switched off through that sentence and said, what on earth are you talking about, James? And we have a language issue in here that is causing some significant concerns on it. But behind that are some significant strategic, long-term and structural issues that we need to fix as an industry to ensure that not only our competitiveness, but our marketplace remains. So let me just take that through. There is undoubtedly a lot of noise right now in the system. And we need to focus on noise reduction, because that is driving significant costs and is bringing a significant amount of frustration at a customer level that will have medium to longer term impacts beyond the initial costs that we have today. So we have to work on the operational noise issues. Beyond that, we're going to have to find, and we are going to find, that the EU trade has brought a loss of competitiveness for us to trade right now. And there's probably at least 2, if not 3 matters that we need to consider on that, which we must come to quickly. But perhaps it's arguable to say that's something that business is pretty good at doing, because competitiveness is something that we all focus on, whatever markets we're seeking. The most troubling issue beyond that will be the structural matters. And those will be matters which we will lose market. We will lose the ability or access to markets, not simply because of a policy or a decision, but because of the practicalities of the decision makers within those processes. And actually, those are the ones that we need to be very clear on in the near future on. And perhaps I can take you a little bit more detail on those 3 layers right now. So right now, we can see, the noise issues. Well, we can talk about the cost of transport right now. Not only the fact that we've got a new trade agreement, we're in the middle of a global pandemic, and we know that the cost of transportation has significantly risen up here, including the surcharges on some of these issues that have appeared, where people are seeking to minimize risk, but at the same time ensuring their margins are maintained within the supply chain. We also have the cost of failure of preparation. I'm not blaming anyone here, but that's true. We have a lot of inconsistency. We have a lot of delay on poor documentation, wrong color pens. I'm sure Chris can speak a lot more about these things. When you get into rules of origins, it is very difficult if they apply them slightly different to what we've been expecting outside the EU, etc. on it. So we're going to find there's a lot of initial costs in these things. What the plea at the moment in this one is, as Ed has just said, bring specific examples of inconsistency, of poor rules, of one direction to Northern Ireland works in this way, the other direction from the other Northern Ireland works in a completely different basis or a different software. These things need to be ironed out and be brought up to UK government, and Welsh government is playing a significant role in doing that. So we have to bring examples, clear, specific examples, and once we're there, we expect all the bodies, including Make UK, to doing the right thing to ensure that these can be ironed out. But I'm going to move you forward on that, because I'm sure Chris is going to start talking a little bit more about some of those issues today. And that is the competitiveness issues. We have to be aware, not only will we be facing a fixed cost increase based on additional workload that is required, and also we have to be aware that the cost of transportation is likely to increase as well. Now, whether that is opportunism or whether that is just a structural cost, those things are going to be there. Therefore, we have to mitigate these. The mitigation of these things are that we need to work very significantly in the digital world on new platforms, new systems, to ensure that we can do add one bit of information on one occasion, and it will work to all parties in a seamless way. There's no doubt that we have to do that, and I expect business to continue to doing that, and we'll be requesting support on those matters, but particularly where they are common matters across the industry itself. Not only is the fixed cost going to increase, but we will have to accept what we've always accepted. We always accepted that we needed a partner in Europe sometimes, even when we were in Europe, to enable us to return VAT returns within a short period of time from a cash flow point of view. And of course, that partner or that local entity was not very significant in the scheme of all these things. And so perhaps it's new for us, but actually those minor things always occur. But beyond that, there's another level of activity movement that is worrying for us, which we'll get to. And the final thing is that, as a business, from the third competitiveness issue, we have to ensure that we're working on a supply chain that is not only fulfilling the rules of origin, but is competitive enough to ensure that it drives our competitiveness forward as well. That is, of course, an opportunity for the UK, as well as it being a concern in the short to medium term itself. And focusing on what is the right supply chains to do that with is very important for us. I think a lot of those are normal business. Okay, and in actual fact, we'll be looking for common tools and common systems and common platforms. I was looking the other day on a port in Spain that's got its own software platform, but it's accepted by the whole of Spain. And therefore, it looks a good tool by which you could use. So common platforms are important to be put in place, but above and beyond that, there are things that we can do as businesses to resolve those competitiveness issues. The third area is of real concern, and I think we only are starting to understand the level of concern on this issue. And these are what I call market structural issues. I'm not certain, even after the initial noise and even the initial, that the cost of transportation will remain the same as what we enjoyed before. I think there are transport corridor changes that may occur, both at an Ireland, UK and EU level, that will mean that the frequency or capacity and frequency of what may be available will be reduced. And that will be an ongoing basis if we don't ensure that there is mutual trade going on between these two parties. There are other procurement strategies where, quite simply, if people don't do it at value level but do it at piece price level, we will be implicated anyhow, because the procurement strategies will allow them to put on the carbon levy issues or the delivery issues, which will deteriorate across our border itself. And we have to be very aware of that, and that normally is based on relationships. And the issue that has really come up in the last 2 weeks has been to do with these regulatory matters and regulatory affairs issues. And these are a lot to do what in my old industry we used to call about homologation or certification or licensing. It could be of an individual or a technician or an engineer. But some of the examples we've had in the aerospace industry and in the last week in the medical and the pharmaceutical industries itself are a significant concern. Because quite simply, we're not able to operate simply with, if you like, shell companies in Europe to make these things work. We will have to do it twice. And if you've got a decision to do it for a larger market or a smaller market, an EU market or a UK market, you're unlikely to run both in parallel. You'll have one as a lead and the second as a follower. And the risk for us on the regulatory affairs matter is that the EU will be the lead, it's the bigger market, and the UK will become the follower. So significant sectors, and Chris may talk about this, significant sectors may find that the initial development, the high quality jobs, the decision-making jobs will need to be done in an EU base first before it's a UK base. Now, such issues need to come back to government at its fastest rate, because they will not be something that the businesses can control. And we need to look for interventions at an altogether different level on this matter. So my plea today is, we will have a lot to say. Some stuff you'll talk about, I won't fully understand, I'll admit, okay. But please, let's separate what is a short-term operational issue where we need to remove inconsistency, ensure that the cost of transportation is coming more back to a stable level, then work on the competitiveness issues ourselves with a little bit of support by government. But ultimately, if there are going to be market structural issues where assets, operations, skilled resource will need to move offline, we need to flag those up earlier and prioritize those sectors by which we get some earlier interventions or some mediation on it. And that will be my plea today, to use Make UK as well as some of your other business organizations to ensure we're coherent and clear on the voice that we require to go back to, yes, Welsh government, but also UK government on these subjects. I'll leave it there, Tim, for today.
Many thanks indeed, James. And in the time allowed, I think an excellent overview of what industry is facing and really how we need, as you described, to inform government with clear examples of where things are not working properly. And it's this relationship between industry and government that is so important to make sure that we do get our voices heard, because time is ticking. There are timelines coming up. We may talk about July the 1st in terms of declarations later on. So really important, and Janice and team, well done for putting this event on, because it does give industry this chance of coming forward, listening to what's going on, both government and industry bodies, and allowing us to put forward the views from industry to government, so we have this cohesive approach to make things happen, and sometimes they have to happen. So James, thanks very much, and I'm sure there'll be questions coming your way when we come to the Q&A panel. And again, folks, please use the chat facility. So James, you talked a lot about logistics, and we know from our experience in the automotive world of challenges going on in terms of cross-border activity. So really pleased to introduce Chris Yarsley. Chris is Policy Manager at Logistics UK. Chris, over to you. Thank you.
And hopefully you can all see my slide there. So thank you very much for the invitation. Been asked to talk about the effect of the end of the transition period on transport and logistics. So just moving straight into the presentation. Just a quick opening introduction that last year we did actually rebrand ourselves. So if you haven't heard of Logistics UK, hopefully you would have heard of the Freight Transport Association. We decided that with much like Make UK, we wanted to sort of refresh the brand, but to make it absolutely clear of who we are, who we represent. So we decided to change the name to Logistics UK. So we are a totally multimodal trade association representing operators on road, rail, maritime, and in aviation, and also both buyers and the suppliers of transport services. And as a matter of sort of personal introduction, I've been with Logistics UK since 2005, and from 2005 to 2017, I was based in the Brussels office. So I was in charge of handling the liaison between the association and the European institutions, because as we know, sort of transport law, is governed by European law and then transposed into domestic legislation. So that's who we are. That's who I am. And then just a quick slide that just demonstrates the value of logistics to the UK economy. I don't need to talk about that. I think we're all quite well aware of the importance to get things to the right place from producers to the end consumer. So Ed mentioned the date of it, and it was quite interesting that I actually had that as a title. So the agreement was actually reached on the 24th of December. At that time, we were trying to get grips on the agreement, but also in terms of testing of drivers going into France. So Christmas Eve was quite busy from a logistics point of view. But a key point there is that we did welcome the agreement between the UK and the EU, but as I've written there, and it's a very important point, it's still not ratified. No deal is potentially still on the table. The reason being, the EU side has not yet finished its formal ratification, which means going through internal agreements with a final rubber stamp of the European Parliament. That date for final ratification has been put back and back and back. So we are well aware that it still could end in a new deal if things fall apart. There are, rumblings in the press, as we've all seen, between sort of the actors involved. So we are just hopeful that you get final ratification from the EU side. But on my second point, though, it is a base on which we can make an agreement, a better agreement, hopefully in the future. It was much better than no deal. That would have been pretty difficult for the UK economy and for exporters and importers to have handled, especially at in the situation we are with COVID-19. So what we wanted to say, though, to both the government or the authorities on both sides of it is that we were given no time to prepare. We had the 2-year transition period. However, there was no agreement until somebody mentioned the 11th hour. I would say, even further than that, 1 minute, 1 second to midnight, the agreement came, and then we were entering a live trading environment. There was no possibility of running dual systems in place to test and stress test the new live trading environment. It was a live environment with full checks going inbound into the EU. So this is our transition period. This is the key message that we've been saying. We need time to implement the new arrangements, bed them into it, get people trained up on the new declarations, on the new paperwork that is involved, whether it be literally with a pen and paper or an electronic declaration. So that's been our sort of key message at the beginning of the year. So James mentioned about a very kind of sensible way of looking at things. So you've got the short-term, long-term, and more structural issues. I can concentrate a little bit on a snapshot of what's happening at the moment, because what we do with our membership is we run what we call our performance tracker, which it's a survey that goes out to all our members. And just last week, we got the results of the latest round, which goes up until pretty much the end of February. Some little stats there about who responded to it. But what the key message is that this gave us some information of what the situation has now been in the first trading weeks of 2021. And I'm just going to throw up a slide. Reason being it'll come forward is that you don't have to look at that, but it does appear that, you know, we have had the lockdowns, but volumes of traffic on the road are coming back up again, to show that there is, you know, trade is still moving around, you know, goods and services, utility vehicles are still moving around the network. So yeah, that's just a quick snapshot of the current situation in the UK at the moment. So where are we on the agreement? So as a result of our performance tracker, it came split 52, 58, not 52, 50, 48, 42, 58. And as you can see, we've got the little word jumble there with the what the sort of the main comments that came back to it from our members. So 42 of them, pretty much domestic operators, has not had a major impact on them, but the majority, 58, have reported, you know, delays, extended delivery times, and you know, a lot of them concerned about the supply chain, getting bits and parts from the manufacturers to the suppliers and to the end customer. So yes, the majority of our members have had a sort of what you could describe as a negative impact since the end of the transition period, as we've moved into the first trading month of this new year and new trading environment. But as I showed on that original slide, sort of domestic vehicle movements are sort of, you know, recovering. And as this slide, the chart on the right hand side of the screen comes from the OBR, and it looks at the the transport going across the short straits. And as you can see, it's the yellow line is this time last year, and the sort of, I really have trouble looking at sometimes these colors, but it's the kind of the purple line, which is the lowest one because of the COVID situation. But as you can see, it's now sort of come back onto trend with the yellow line representing transport from this time last year. So it does show that short straight traffic has returned. There's a whole discussion about numbers of vehicles, what's in the vehicles, the value of the load versus the absolute number of trucks going across. But it's true to say though, and again, there's discussions on the numbers, the Welsh ports do have a different story, and certainly Holyhead has seen a reduction in transport going across the Irish Sea. So trying to work out why this is happening, and you know, there's three kind of you know, quick answers that you could put for this in place. So everyone's been talking about these boats that now are taking vehicles direct from Ireland or the continent direct and avoiding the UK. So that's what we describe as the land bridge. It remains to be seen. We don't know if this is a short-term problem or a structural problem, because we don't know how this market will evolve. We do have a sister association in Ireland, FTA Ireland, and I was speaking to them, and they have one of their members there who has decided to use these services, and the operator reported that the goods arrived at the customer's destination. I think it was in France, 4 hours in general after it would have arrived if the vehicle had used the land bridge, and it cost about 300 to 400 euros more for that load. So yes, increased costs, but what they saw a much more reliable journey, total lack of paperwork needed, bar the usual ferry ticket kind of thing, because you're EU to EU transport. And again, will that diversion in traffic be long term? Still don't know. There's a massive difference between the driver driving through the UK, the GB, or taking the boat all the way around. It's a very long crossing. We'll wait and see. Another important movement, and again Ed referenced this with the groupage, which is multiple loads and sort of retailers going into sort of Northern Ireland from GB distribution points. if you go via Holyhead Dublin, you have to fill out the Irish forms as well as the protocol documentation. But if you just go up via Liverpool or Canryan in Scotland, you only have to fill out the sort of Irish protocol documentation. So again, it's a simple equation of which gives me the most reliable journey, and it's the one with possibly the fewest bits of paper to fill in. And also then the obvious answer is the impact of COVID on Irish demand and pull, and the tourist market is closed essentially at the moment, and also the economic sectors still remain shut as they do in the UK. So there is demand suppression going on. So that's I don't have any answers to the questions of what's happening in Wales at the moment. We do have to just keep monitoring it and see what happens. But there are a number of different reasons that this traffic could be diverting. So they're just moving on to, again, we're looking at the impact of this agreement on transport. So here are the rules, so to speak, that we are now bound by. The important one is everyone talked about it with zero quota, zero tariffs. Now, that is a good thing. There are still other, non-tariff barriers that have come into being, so to speak. But the key one was that point-to-point of, a load going from sort of Cardiff to Calais is now it still remains free. You have all the other bits of paper you now have to fill out, but there is no restrictions on that journey from going on. What happens though is there are now serious restrictions on the ability of sort of domestic UK operators to do what is described as a cabotage operation, which is domestic operations not in your own home country. We used to have the 3 in 7 rule famously, so 3 operations within 7 days, but now we are essentially GB, because Northern Irish operators are under a different rule. We only have the right to do 1 operation within 7 days. So it's been referenced before. So how does this work in practice? Now, we have a very good example of the touring companies that are moving performances around. So, you'll have groups, bands, choirs. They'll book a tour and it could cover a multiple number of different countries. Now, at the moment, the rules just simply the new rules, just do not allow what happened in the past to carry on. And it is a shame, I'm not going to lie, because it was a success story for the UK. UK companies handled about 85% of all tours across Europe. And that is simply not going to be the case anymore. So we are now faced with the beginning of the move of these companies to establish themselves. A lot of them are choosing Ireland or possibly the Netherlands and establishing themselves there, but with European law. So the rules that govern road transport operators, Regulation 1071/06 for the keys, 09, sorry, you need to have vehicles registered at the address of that. You can't just open up a little office that just sends the paperwork back. You need to have labour agreements, vehicle agreements, maintenance schedules, all held at the HQ on the documentation. So we are now going to see these companies fully leave with taking the jobs with them. And as one of our members who do these tours has said, that will be the beginning of a brain drain. So we are now faced with, the rehearsal people, the lighting, the technicians. They'll all start moving as these companies will relocate. So we've got a quick resume of the information of the engagement we've been having with UK ministers, all the way up to the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, Michael Gove, just trying to raise this agreement. And you've probably heard about this in the press. All the leading singers are coming out against it, but it is a genuinely real issue. Again. And this falls back into what James was saying. This is a structural issue that needs an agreement to change it. Ed referenced the bodies that have been set up within the agreement that are going to be the kind of the discussion board, discussion groups where changes could happen. they haven't yet been established on the EU side yet, so we don't know who we'd be talking to, but it's already too late sometimes. And quickly moving on, so imports, big issue coming up. So that was all sorts of things leaving the UK. This is now things coming into the UK. So these next slides are just for reference, but we are now faced with a staged approach to imports coming into the UK. So big one coming up is the 1st of April, more for animal, sort of a plant-based origin. Big one is July though, when full rest of the world checks will come in, and you know, we do need to see the infrastructure that is going to be required. So border inspection posts, as Ed have referenced, being put in place to cope with these checks and these inspection areas where goods will need to stop and, you know, be looked at, and documents checked and everything, much as what is happening when goods from the UK leave and go to the EU. James mentioned the colour of pen. It's to do with the ink used on veterinary certificates. If the vet uses a black pen, gone. No, it has to be a non-black pen to be used. Whether the UK is going to be as strict or not, we don't know. But yeah, and so this now is just, again, just to give you an idea of the changes. You don't have to look at it totally, but of what is changing and where the checks are going to be needed. And this next slide is the new normal. This is what an importer, you know, into the UK will have to, you know, do. In the old days, it was just sign a commercial agreement with your importer, get the transport sorted out, and drive it in. This is now the what's going to happen. All the different stages, the IT things that need to be the IT interfaces that need to be used, the different health checks, etc., etc., etc. So you'll have this in the slide pack. Not, you know, you don't have to look at it. It just shows the complexity of the new normal on importers coming into the UK. So just very quickly, it's a final slide. It's a sort of non-exhaustive, and that's very key. You know, asks the government, we do need more time. You know, we are still, as we mentioned at the beginning, in our transition period. The government took a unilateral decision on GBNI checks within the protocol checks. You know, it's the kind of thing we need, but it does fall under the Northern Ireland Protocol, which is a EU-UK established creation. So there does need to be an agreement with the EU on that moving forward to make it on a firm footing. Touring companies, as it has, you know, as our markets and our society reopens, that is going to come back, and we do need an agreement on there. And again, border infrastructure checks, where are the buildings and so on and so forth going to be placed for inbound checks from the 1st of July? Is the government going to have to put in another easement in place and push back the checks, because that just kicks the ball down the road, or the can down the road, sorry. And you know, we do need some final answers. And yeah, so thank you, Chair. That's a quick scan through there.
Well done indeed. Massively complex subjects, as you described, Chris. I think July the 1st is something that everybody needs to be fully aware of the documentation and paperwork. And I dare say through Make UK and other foreign bodies, we will be telling our respective members what they should be looking at and how to do it. But Chris, thanks very much. You know, it describes the whole umbrella of what's out there in the logistics world, and just how complex this is. We're only a few months into it, but we can already see the challenges that are coming our way. And we've talked about short term and medium term, and at some point we'll get a definition, I think, from either from Ed or James, or possibly now coming up with Richard, in terms of what is short term. It's an easy thing to say, but how long is that piece of string? I'm not quite clear, so we'll sort that one out fairly quickly. So, Chris, thanks. And now I'm very pleased to introduce Richard Rumblow, Director of International Affairs and Export Services at Make UK. Richard and I meet on forums like this quite regularly, but I think he's the font of all knowledge when it comes to these things. So, Richard, very pleased to welcome you to the stage virtually.
Lovely. Good afternoon, Tim. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for my introduction, and also for everyone for being here today. I do have a few slides, but conscious of time, some of them, the comments in these slides have been repeated by colleagues earlier, so I won't do that. And as Janice has said, the slides will be available after the presentation anyway. What I just want to focus on a few things here today is a couple of elements of the agreement as it affects trading goods and trading services, as it affects manufacturers. I think the one point I would say, and I'll introduce my presentation from here, is what does the agreement cover? It covers tariff-free and quota-free goods, but in now 3 markets. And I think that is an important point to recognise. It is Great Britain, it is the EU, and it is Northern Ireland. And if you have responsibilities for trade, particularly in goods in all of those 3 markets, you will have or be experiencing changes to that trading relationship as a result of the agreement coming into legal effect from the 1st of January. And you'll be grappling with some of those challenges, short-term challenges ahead of you too. And I do note James's point in his presentation that some of these are probably longer term issues in relation to the structure of the agreement, but also fundamentally, of course, the agreement does, by its very nature and also by the negotiating strategy which was put in place by the UK government, set very firmly that some of those issues may be structural, but they could be much more of a long-term basis because of the nature of the agreement and the construct of the agreement the UK government wanted to seek as a result of the negotiations. So as we've heard already, yes, there are new borders, there are border formalities, declarations, checks and controls, and we've heard already that some of those have had an impact already, both in terms of exports, and I fully concur with remarks just made about it in terms of logistics. Our members are having similar feelings in terms of the delays and controls they're experiencing, and also has been said the import changes which are coming into effect, particularly for the EU Great Britain market on the 1st of April and the 1st of July, will have an impact, certainly, if you as businesses aren't ready for those, but more importantly, if the infrastructure to support the governance around those imports are also not in place at the same time. The things I want to touch on specifically are rules of origin, which perhaps for many of you on the call has been a new phenomena, which you're getting used to. Rules of origin is not, however, a new term, nor is it a new element of trade. Rules of origin is a common construct of trade agreements between economic partners. The fact that you probably haven't been experienced in it so far is because as part of the European Union, the rules of origin we were part of the rules of origin requirements within the EU for its trade relations with third countries. And therefore we were part of a unified ability of having a shared rules of origin capability. The fact that we are now a sovereign state, a separate customs state, means that rules of origin come into play, and for many of you are coming to affect that. I also briefly touch on market regulation as it affects product labeling, but I also want to touch on services, and services not because necessarily they've had little airtime, but services are an integral part of manufacturing for many of our members, particularly when it comes to the ability of providing service personnel, installation personnel, and other qualified professionals to go and assist in the sale and also the ongoing service of a product, but also in terms of the fact that there are going to be significant changes to those arrangements. And also in services too, I just want to briefly touch on the fact that for many of you, you should be taking a look at your contracts to make sure your contract status is up to date with regard to your suppliers and customers. Rules of origin. This is a standard trade facilitation tool in free trade agreements. It allows countries to apply degrees of control for goods coming into their markets to ensure that there is not unfair competition in that particular good or product category compared to domestic production. As I said, because we've been part of the EU until the end of last year, we were part of the EU's calculation for rules of origin. And for those of you not exposed to perhaps international trade beyond the EU, or certainly that's the case, then you would not have really experienced the need to qualify for rules of origin and importantly, how to demonstrate it. It allows for the preferential rate of tariffs to be applied within the trade agreement. So if you satisfy the rules of origin, then you will have tariff-free and quota-free access to the market of destination. If you don't qualify for rules of origin, then I'm afraid the loss of preferential tariffs is the consequence of that action, and the tariff applicable to that good is that which would be stipulated in the contract, in the legal agreement between the UK and the EU. They Obviously, you can still trade goods with the EU without meeting the rules of origin qualification, but of course, the tariffs will be applicable to the good in the future. There are a number of ways in which the rules of origin test can be applied. There are three principal tests which are necessary for you to work through as a manufacturer. The first of all, these are the product can be wholly obtained within the UK or the EU as part of the manufacturing process that you undertake. That the product produced in the UK or the EU can be exclusively from the originating materials in both of those countries. And also, if that isn't the case, and the product originates not from any of those countries, then it must undergo substantial transformation by you before it is then exported to another country, whether that's an EU country or a other country outside of the EU. And there are various processes and mechanisms to determine how you calculate that substantial transformation. It can either be done by added value, which means that you need to calculate and need to have an assessment as to what that added transformation value is to the good in hand. Secondly, that certainly if you were able to change the tariff classification of that good, so by the economic activity you've done, and it naturally changes its product specification and description from the point of view of commodity code classification. And lastly, there are certain other manufacturing processes which you can undertake, which will allow that good to be classified as of origin of the UK. But that is quite an integrated process to do. In terms of the agreement, it provides for what's termed bilateral accumulation between the UK and the EU, which means that it is acceptable for goods to be transmitted between both those countries in terms of the origin of that product being considered. But products from outside of the EU, and certainly countries where the EU has a trade agreement with or a customs agreement with, i.e. Turkey, does not automatically classify for that rule of origin unless you do substantial transformation on it in terms of your manufacturing process. So you do have to be watched very careful. In terms of the admin, that is something you will need to get to grips with quite quickly. There will be a need for you to declare the origin of that product, either because you can self-certify that you're certain that product meets rules of origin in the domestic market, or you've got a proof chain of information from your suppliers for them to be able to demonstrate to you the origin of the products. So that is integral as part of the proof of rules of origin. Lack of proof means that you won't necessarily benefit from preferential tariffs. So it's important that documentation follows the goods route to your customer. It's important too that you retain the proof of that origin as well, and that becomes a standard documentation process within your business. It is a requirement to travel with the good, and it is also a requirement to show to a market surveillance authority such as the HMRC if ever asked to do so in the future. Now there is a partial easement for that for this calendar year, where firms here have the ability and the time to source that proof of origin and to get their customer supply chain details sorted out from that point of view. But you are required to have that documentation definitely in place from the 1st of January next year, with it being able to be backdated to the 1st of January this year for the purposes of market surveillance. I do note on the call, we have two colleagues here from the Welsh Government, Ben Wong and others here. They are currently undertaking a rules of origin exercise with Welsh business to help understand some of the challenges that firms are having. I would certainly recommend that we, through us or through other organisations, we can help filter that information into that piece of research. It's well worth taking part in if you have the time to do it. It's an important exercise for them to understand how the rules of origin issue is affecting Welsh businesses at the moment. Marketing and labelling. Another change that took effect from the 1st of January, it was signposted in the autumn of last year that we would be having changes to product labelling requirements. That is a fundamental part of leaving the single market and the customs union. So 3 types of product labelling requirements are now into place. We have a separate UKCA labelling for products which are destined for the Great British market. We have the continuation, of course, of CE labelling for the European market. And for goods destined for Northern Ireland, you have a separate Northern Ireland certification market called NI, UKNI. This is particularly of concern for those of you who have to use the requirements of product conformity assessment. If you have product conformity assessment requirements, then you will have to make separate arrangements now in the EU for that to be undertaken to allow the CE marking process to continue, and also for the Great British market for an assessed body to be able to undertake that work for you for goods destined only for Great Britain. For goods destined for Northern Ireland, that Great Britain assessment body can do that for you, and they will label that either as a CE mark product and or a UK NI product as a result. But those labeling requirements have now come into effect, and hopefully you're cognizant of the requirements to do so according to your particular product that you are doing. There are certain additional legal responsibilities in requirements of that, particularly in terms of being able to place the good on the European market, and responsibilities of economic operators and importers have changed to the point where some of those who you might have considered as distributors in the past may well, on agreement, become economic operators and importers, which therefore makes their legal status changed in order for them to provide the goods for you in those European markets. There is more detail available for that on government websites, including that of the Welsh government, but that's a very, very quick run through of some of the things relating to marketing and labelling. In terms of contracts, the first number of bullets on here are very important. One assumes that most of your trading activity with European customers and suppliers is based on a contract, and perhaps it is now time for you to review that contract for all the reasons I've set out here. Some of the provisions and conditions in those contracts were undoubtedly prepared well before the 31st of December last year, and possibly even prepared even before the concept of our departure from the European Union had been considered, and certainly let alone the detail of that change that has taken place. So you should check in areas of responsibility for, first of all, where the jurisdiction of that contract is held. Who is going to have responsibility for the payment of customs, tariffs, VAT, and other requirements? The requirement to show proof of origin is also stipulated too. I think it's also important to show where cost increases and who has responsibility for that, and also where the issues lie should there be regulatory change in the future. So in other words, if you have a product that is subject to regulatory change, either because of UK divergence from EU rules in the future, but your commercial contract aligns that product to European regulation in the future, then you'll need to have a serious discussion with your supplier as to where and how that change takes place, and how your commercial contracts will need to reflect that. So if it's a good time to ensure that you have reviewed your commercial contracts to ensure they're up to date and reflective of the changes that have taken place. It is also true too if you provide services, particularly if you're requiring employees to travel as well. And so make sure that if you've got services agreements too, it's important. And on the point of data, some positive news on that. It is likely that the EU will grant the UK adequacy provision similar to that we had pre-December of last year, which therefore makes the ability to hold, store and transmit data a lot easier if you have substantive data based on EU subjects. Further details of that are expected through a formal announcement by the EU in the course of the next couple of months. And the last thing on business travel. We haven't really seen the impact yet of the changes affecting business travel for members. The pandemic has dampened down the ability for people to travel, very limited business travel, if at all, is taking place, which has really dampened the impact. But there is significant impact for firms who do expect their employees to travel to the European Union for the purposes of work and or providing services. The first big change is the loss of membership, the loss of mutual recognition and professional qualifications. So unless your employees have a European recognized qualification of the country of destination, it is unlikely that they will be able to practice that qualification as of now. And until there is mutual recognition agreed between the relevant bodies, including those who issue the certificates of professional and technical qualification, there will be some gap between UK nationals with UK certification being able to practice within the European Union. And also in terms of general business travel, the ability to travel quickly to Europe for a meeting, to attend a conference, to attend something like that, has restrictions attached to it. There are some derogations which make some of this transport and movement easier, but that doesn't necessarily prevent all the requirements in terms of visas and other requirements to show on arriving in the country you meet the conditions of entry into the requirement for the purposes of business. The issue here particularly, the critical point here, is that you have 27 countries with 27 different requirements in terms of what business travel means for them. It isn't simply to say, if I know what I have to do for France, it must be the same for Germany. It isn't. You need to understand the specific rules in every member state for the requirements of business travel in the future, even for the purposes of relatively straightforward, simple business purposes. There is information from the gov.uk website in terms of what those requirements are, but it is a process that you'll have to get familiar with if you are sending or going to reinstate sending people for business travel purposes to the EU anytime soon. That's the end of the presentation, Tim. Over to you.
Many thanks indeed, Richard. And nobody said this was going to be easy, did they? And you've heard from our presenters so far of the complexity of all of this. But, you know, thank goodness we have people, the experts who understand these things. And through Make UK and the forums are the bodies that we can understand your questions, concerns, and relay those back to the people that can help you with them, because I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions coming. So our last presenter is Dickie Davis, OBE from the Welsh Government. Dickie is Deputy Director, Industrial Transformation Division. He's going to talk about the strategy moving forward, reconstruction and resilience plan. So Dickie, 10 minutes, over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim, and thanks, Janice, and everybody for inviting me. I just think it's worth pointing out at this stage that you had Ed speaking right at the start. You've got myself here, extraordinary links with Industry Wales and the various forums. And also there's a lot of my guys and international travel guys from Welsh Government in the audience as well. So it is that general picture that I want you to leave this with, and I'll come back to that at the start when I finish. Before I go on to this first slide, at lunchtime, I phoned a colleague of mine and said, give me an idea of what we as a government have supported you and your companies, our businesses and our economy with to date over COVID. And I was absolutely staggered. Just give you a snapshot in terms of the non-domestic rates and the local discretionary fund. Since December, we've had 77,000 grants awarded, totaling 250 million. In terms of the ERF, the Economic Resilience Fund, etc., we've had 4. The first 2 were emergency operating and sustainability and survivability for businesses. The third was business development, and the fourth is sector specific. And that sector specific one, so far, we've had 5,500 awards valuing 49 million. And the overall package, guys, is 1.95 billion in the last year to businesses. So that's eye-watering stuff. I just thought you would be, sort of scene setter for you. Now, when Janice asked me to speak on this, she asked me to do a little bit of crystal ball gazing and also to have a look at some of the sort of tactical stuff and what we're doing now. And I think it's worth everybody just glancing at this first slide here. And the vision that we have involving the prosperous economy, the green economy, and the equal economy, all is underpinning the Wellbeing and Future Generations Act. Now, this is an act in law. So if you've got any of your strat guys, or if you need a thrilling read at night, please get your head around the Wellbeing and Future Generations Act. It is in law and underpins everything that we do for each other. 3 outcomes, speaks for itself, and I'm going to come on to those in a minute, with 5 beacons, and you'll see those beacons running through my my presentation. Next slide, please. So this is another way of looking at it. On the green side, everything that we're doing is obviously emphasizing the importance of the circular, the decarbonisation, and the innovation, and underpinning the innovation. On the equality side, in so many ways, we've got to market ourselves as a fair work nation and ensuring that we remain as competitive as possible. And that competitiveness underpins our prosperity. And I really do want people just to sort of step back, and you'll see my very last slide in terms of pride and what we've achieved. And that achievement was underpinned by the work that the CERET team, the critical equipment requirement engineering team, of which I had the privilege of being a part with James Davis, who was speaker earlier, supporting the NHS finding PPE. And it was the ability and the flexibility of our manufacturing base which really helped us out. And at some stage we got down to 2 or 3 days of PPE, and we never ran out. But again, I'll come back to that. Next slide, please. So in terms of the, there are 5 beacons, as I said. The foundation economy, we're obviously trying to sustain our city centres, our town centres, as much as possible, but also what we're trying to do is, if there's a Welsh problem, to find a Welsh answer to it. And there's a huge amount of work being led by the Deputy Economy Minister at the moment, looking at our public procurement to see what we can do to help ourselves and sustain the manufacturing base and sustain the supply chain that we are almost all about in Wales. In terms of the protecting and enabling skills, that speaks for itself, but we've got to be able to underpin and adapt quickly. And the links that we have in terms of HEFCU, James, for example, was who was speaking earlier, is on that. And it is the link that we have between businesses and the adaptation of curriculums and colleges and support to them that we can bring to bear. We can bring your wishes to bear very quickly. In terms of innovation, again, all around the digital side, and I might bring somebody in to talk about that a little bit later on, but just it's a huge emphasis in terms of that digitalization piece and the automation piece, obviously. Next slide, please. On the green side, I'll talk about that one later. And social value, it is, everybody's aware of the economic contract that we have at the moment. And, you know, we want something for something, and that something must be for Wales and for the local economy. Thanks, Tim. So in terms of procurement, let's have there's another slide coming. This is very, very general indeed, but it just gives you an idea of the bridge that we are creating between the public sector procurement and the private sector. Construction is a very obvious sector that we're using at the moment, but we are trying to ensure that we are going to procure as much as we possibly can from our own manufacturing base to fill our own demand. And that is being reflected in a significant amount of work that the Cabinet is doing. And that bridge and the support to the supply chain necessary for that bridge is reflected in that private sector demand as well. Thanks, Tim. So with that as the picture, I just want to change my tack slightly and just remind you that we have a huge, a very, very experienced and a very successful international trade team that is available to you to support you. In terms of raising our profile, those 3 points speak for themselves: raising our profile, growing our economy, and ensuring the Wellbeing and Future Generations Act emphasis is very clear throughout. So we are sustainable and we are competitive, but it's the growing the economy piece that I want to highlight there. And again, I've got colleagues in the audience here who may nip in to answer your questions on that. But did you know, for example, next slide, please, Tim, that we've got offices in all of these locations? And those offices are there for you to help you. So if you are looking at going to San Francisco, if you are looking at going to India or into the Middle East or whatever, not only use your trade bodies, and you obviously speak to Janice, but use your forums, you speak to Tim and Rob, etc., but please, please, please use our offices, because they have the local knowledge, they have the bespoke knowledge of us here in Wales, and the bespoke knowledge of where they are around the world. So don't forget to use our offices, please. Thanks, Tim. Now, we are looking at, in terms of promoting ourselves, we're looking at a number of areas. We're looking at obviously the whole economy, and we will help you as much as we possibly can. But these 6 sort of areas, these areas here, very, very loose, very generic, seem to be the ones that are coming out and getting as much traction as we can in terms of market and opportunity and supply chain in Wales that was reflected globally. So if you're in those, or if you're on the supply chain of those, please push hard, and that's where we will really try to support you as much as we can. Thanks, Tim. So in terms of the reconstruction and reconciliation stuff that I was talking about earlier on, it's underpinned by this manufacturing action plan. Now, this action plan, both of those policies were released last week. None of you will be surprised by any of these, but I want to underline the point about the local economy and Welsh problem, Welsh answer. But those 10 themes there will run through everything that we do for you and with you. But the point is, it's the decarbonisation, it's the automation, it's the skills side, and it's supporting the workforce and supporting the supply chain. You know that more than I do, but it's underpinned in everything that we're doing at the moment within those 2 policies. Thanks, Tim. So I just had a quick look in my in-tray earlier on to try to give you some examples of what is going on and where we're looking for the Welsh manufacturing base to support us and to support the supply chain with the OEMs, etc. So this is just a snapshot. This is a Dickie Davis in-tray. This is nothing special about this whatsoever, but just give you an idea. In terms of the Global Centre of Rail Excellence, we've got a significant amount of support from the UK government last week in the budget, the 30 million, etc. Now, that is in Nant Helen, going to be there to test as many and the supply chain and all the widgets involved in trains, but also the sensors, also the infrastructure, the software, the hardware that's going with a mobility system going forward. So you might not think that you are in the rail business or the mobility business, but you may well be. So explore that with your trade body, please. The ATRC is avionics, and this is a link with the MOD on the back of some military and some commercial aviation systems, and we aim to be the centre of avionics for the UK, and that's going to be up in Deeside. We're working with the MOD on that at the moment. We're setting everything in train, everything that we possibly can, although the first point is actually a grid link, a stronger grid link, to get that gigafactory for the batteries. We missed out on the first one for a number of reasons. We're doing everything we can to get the second one. And the fourth bit down there is actually on the nuclear side and the small modular reactors and various programs to get funding down to support the R&D and in fact some of the hardware. The steel side is very interesting, and I suppose you could really reflect that steel and that sector across almost everything that we do, because as you've heard me say 3 times now, we've got to remain competitive, and I want people to buy British steel because it's green. We've got the standards in place to ensure that it's not dirty steel, it's green, and it's clean. We've got to be competitive. Our wages are significantly lower than in Europe in that steel sector, so we've got to be competitive. Got to be high quality. We've got the legislation in place to ensure that is the case, and the quality of the workforce. And also, much of the service industry required for steel is onshore. So we don't have those long chains of communication, etc. So it's those things, the green, competitive, high quality and service, we could almost reflect so many of what we do, so many of the sectors. The SWIC side, growing in importance by the second at the moment, particularly with the high emitters and the Industrial Energy Transformation Fund coming down from UK government to assist those. And we've got Chris Williams attached to Industry Wales from Tata to be able to support that. And we're just doing various studies, etc., to support the emitters on that one. Cyber Hub, lots and lots of work on cyber in absolutely everything that we do. We all know that, but I can guarantee you some of you out there will still not be cyber essential. So please, please, please put that on the notepad and get yourself qualified and more protected on that one. Lots of offshore wind and the sort of renewable energy side, and this is on the floating side or indeed the fixed bottom with the tidal in Bristol, in the Bristol Channel side. That's very, very interesting and quite a lot of international links with Ireland at the moment. And I mentioned Seret earlier on, an extraordinary piece of work by James and those around him, many in the audience here, and it's a huge thank you from Welsh Government for the support. Seret is still going on behind the scenes, but formally it's paused, but it's still there. But a huge thank you to James. And my final slide, I just really want the second point there. So there's the clusters that we know about and we deal with, and the sectors that we deal with. And this is just a snapshot. The second point, please, Tim. So these are the forums, the trade bodies, your voice that we listen to all the time. Frankly, I cannot think of an instant or an issue in the last year where I haven't picked up the phone and spoken to James or to Tim or to Rob or to John Worley or to Avril. You know, we are very, very close with those forums. So if you have an issue, and I think Chris mentioned it earlier on, you know, please bring it up either via the forums, the trade bodies, by Janice or whatever it is. And the links that we're developing with Make UK is absolutely fantastic. Then if we can strengthen those together, we'll be able to sustain the next bullet point, the next beep. There we are. I get the prize for the busiest slide. So it's not all gloom and doom. We have enormous potential here, and Welsh Government is listening. We are listening very, very hard indeed. We are going into the pre-election period, so things get politically a little bit sensitive. But please know who we are. Talk to us on a very regular basis. Use our internal offices, the internal staff, and the external overseas offices to your advantage. That's me, Janice. Tim.
Many thanks indeed, Dickie. And again, a great overview. It always surprises me, you know, how much stuff is going on, and perhaps we need to market everything better than we currently do. I think when it comes to international activity, putting Wales on the map, we almost hide underneath our own bushel in many respects. And I think
I agree entirely. We should be incredibly proud of who we are and what we achieve. Indeed.
And, you know, a presentation of 10 to 12 minutes really demonstrates the depth of what is going on and how many things are now looking in the new low carbon net zero world that we all will be working in and living in. And I like the idea of make things in Wales for Wales. Great, you know, hallelujah, about time in many respects. So really pleasing to see that that's in process. The manufacturing action plan, a lot of people put a lot of effort into that. So very pleased that that's now been published. And it can't be something that's just published and put on a shelf. We have to action the things within it, and that's the responsibility of all of us, and including bodies like ourselves, to make sure that that's in process.
Well, if I can come back on that, just to
sure.
Put your mind at rest, Tim. We've obviously got various bodies, etc., but I'm the tethered goat that goes in front of Industry Wales Board, and Industry Wales Board will hold the new board will hold my my feet to the fire over that.
Well, you know, we're all in this together. So, ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of the presentations, and being a lousy chairman, I'm afraid we've eaten into the question time. But there haven't been too many questions on the chat. I'm going to pick up on one or two of them. We're due to finish the session in probably 15 minutes or so, so I do have time for a couple of questions. There was one on the chat that caught my eye because it's something that I've been working on and interested in, and that's the whole question around free ports. So Andrew, thank you for putting that on the chat. Free ports, obviously the budget said there were going to be 8 in England. I think we're looking at potential for 2 for Wales. Hopefully we could have more, but a question really to the panel, perhaps for Dickie and Ed in the first instance, of talk around free ports for Wales. What's the impact? And perhaps Richard, you might want to comment on this as well. What should we be thinking of in terms of our manufacturing sector here, and how free ports can be used to our benefit?
Do you want to start on the strategic, Ed?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. It's certainly something that we're considering. As you said, Tim, the UK government announced the free ports position in England. And I think in many ways, the position of the ports in England, I mean, one of the things that we're particularly concerned about, I think, was a considerable free port in Bristol and the competitive impact that might have on Wales. So we're certainly looking very closely at the options around free ports in Wales, trying to maximise the opportunities, like you say, not only in the immediate port community, but then also wider into the supply chain. So I know that's part of active considerations, and it's one of those areas actually where some of the flexibilities of leaving the EU does enable us to support in different ways. So as part of the substance discussions that we're having with the UK government, making that work, free ports is one of those one of those considerations that I know the UK government are actively looking at, and we're supporting that consideration. So I think it's certainly one to watch the space, and certainly there are some opportunities there. We just need to work through the details.
Okay, well, Andrew.
Sorry, Tim, and
yep.
from my perspective, in terms of the sort of tactical piece, I think we've got 11 ports of any substantial size in Wales, one of which is run by UK government, the rest is run by us. And if we can get that free port status, then we will put a significant emphasis on the supply chain to run that. So that is the power, the utilities, the security of it, etc., etc. So it will, it'll be the supply chain emphasis, and perhaps not directly, but to the sort of 2s and 3s within the supply chain who would fit into that.
Great, thanks very much, both. Andrew, hopefully that satisfies your interest in this, and if you want to take anything offline, then you know who to contact. A question that came in previously was rules around shipping to Northern Ireland via ROI or vice versa. And I guess, Richard, that's probably a question that you may like to answer, please.
Yes, I'll have a go. Chris might also have some thoughts on this as well. First of all, there is a difference now between Northern Ireland's position as part of the Great Britain market from the point of view of single market and customs union. Northern Ireland is, for many bits of it, part of and has retained elements of the single market within the European Union. Hence why you are seeing, therefore, border type controls being applied for goods movements from Great Britain to Northern Ireland, because of the potential for it there to be leakage of those goods into the Republic of Ireland, and therefore the formal part of the single market, as well as the potential, as obviously a part of it going into Northern Ireland as well. Yes, there are those controls in place. Those controls have been in place from the 1st of January in full. Yes, there have been some easements which have been provided for in Northern Irish Protocol. And as we've seen recently, the UK government is considering, if not enacting on its own independent easements to help limit some of those practical implications that firms are experiencing. And we've seen that, for example, the UK may voluntarily want to extend some of those beyond the next couple of weeks into the next few months or so. In terms of the route through the Republic of Ireland into Northern Ireland, again, there are going to be similarity of checks going into the Republic of Ireland. You are entering formally into a customs zone outside of Great Britain, and therefore the Irish authorities will be taking appropriate checks on goods routed via the Republic of Ireland, which are destined for Northern Ireland. Chris may be able to speak more specifically on what some of those checks might be and how enforcing the Irish authorities are on those checks taking place.
Chris, that's an invitation for you to add your comments.
Yeah. So again, Logistics UK covering a wide spectrum. We are certainly on sort of GBNI movements. We've been quite active, but more for the retail side of things, getting supermarkets and food into Northern Ireland coming from GB distribution centres. And going back to James's whole model of is it a short-term issue, is it a structural issue? There are things that can be changed that are short-term. For example, without going into the specifics, there's the pre-notification deadline of 24 hours for Irish, where it could be down to 4 hours, which will help a lot in terms of movements. But we've also proposed to the UK government to then take it forward in the protocol discussions. For example, some kind of retail movement system, which would be a version of a trusted trader scheme for retailers. So again, using the new structures and trying to create a way around, reducing the new frictions that come in place. So essentially, what that would do is, for a groupage load of a vehicle of many different products, instead of having to have documentation for each and every product, for a retailer, so going to for their distribution centre in GB to their shops in Northern Ireland, just having a wagon load declaration. So that'll take out a lot of work, a lot of paperwork. So again, just using the new framework, trying to find where you can put in, easements without needing to change it, and hopefully both sides agree to it, and you can do it. So there are things you can do. You just need a very forensic examination of what you're doing, how the rules match against it, and then you can try and talk about what you can do to solve that problem.
Okay, Chris, thanks very much indeed. James, I'd like to ask you a question, or two actually. We talked earlier about short-term, medium, and longer term. One is, what is your definition of those time frames? And two, a couple of things on the chat really refer to localization and the opportunities for localization. I'd like to get your sort of view on how can we as manufacturers here in Wales take advantage perhaps of the opportunities that are coming through localization, that maybe through rules of origin mean that there's opportunity for localization as well as perhaps shipping costs.
Also, Tim, I just point out Tracy's question, which is towards the end of this. I'm hoping that Richard perhaps can look at that one, which is to do with the time, and Chris on the timings of July the 1st on that particular issue. I've forgotten the first question now. Tim, what was the first question?
Well, what is short-term, medium, and long-term in your definition of short-term?
Yeah, it's just a handy hanger on this one here. If we push out things and extension on extension, is a bit like the original negotiations on this particular one here, it will be very difficult to work out, whether we're on about 3 months beyond the 1st of July is short term or not. I think it's a convenient hanger to say, listen, there are issues that until things settle down, consistency, system, paperwork, applications are all there, then it's likely to be throughout this whole year before we get that settled, if I'm frank about it. I think we're going to get extensions on some of these things. There's a lot of noise and a lot of back and forth on legal actions, etc. I think ultimately, hopefully, sense will prevail, not at the 11th hour, but sense prevails about 1 minute to midnight, I think, more often than not, and then we get a bit more grace and time to fix those issues itself. There's no doubt that the rules of origin will become much more significant for us. I mean, just look at the carbon levy issues at the moment that the EU was announcing yesterday as well, about carbon border levy assessments going on in here. More and more the importance to level up the playing field as regards what's really going on from a cost point of view or from a carbon point of view, so there's no unfair advantage within the supply chain, is a trend for us all to do it. And it means that there's opportunity for us to perhaps reconsider some of the offshore activity that we did, and we were part of it. You know, one of the most dreadful KPIs that we had, Tim, in our lifetime was the LCC KPI, where we were having to walk into customers to explain the level of LCC utilization. If you're not with us on that one there, we had to explain to customers how much low-cost country content we were putting into our supply chain to prove competitiveness. What a load of nonsense. Okay, and that's the sort of procurement strategies that were going on 10, 15 years ago. So we've come a long way from there. And the rules of origin, amongst other things, try to protect, to ensure that there's some level of playing field on these issues. So it does mean that we have opportunity to make the right decisions, to take responsibility for cost and carbon in the long term. So they will be there, but there's no point pretending we'll be able to resource things that are structurally incredibly difficult to do right now. One of the examples in CERIT, I hope Vicky doesn't mind me saying this one on PPE, was the reshoring of gloves. We wanted to reshore gloves, but actually we don't have many rubber plantations left within Europe, let alone the UK, for the reshoring of gloves. So until we find an innovative material to break through that one there, reshoring will be incredibly difficult. So what can we reshore? What is significant in the value chain, particularly the carbon and cost value chain for reshoring, will be the importance of it, rather than just chasing the short-term low-hanging fruit, but taking a longer view as regards to the resilience and sustainable approach on reshoring. If I may just comment on free ports as well in this one here. I mean, it's yet to see what we're going to do on free ports, but free ports are a tactic. They're not a strategy. There are tactics. There are tactics to if you like, regenerate ports. Okay, there are tactics by which you get jobs in certain places. But actually, in the added value chain, unless they have different rules with these free ports, they will not be that significant as regards the regeneration of a country at an economic level itself. They're perfectly good tactics, don't get me wrong, but actually we have to take a longer and harder view as to what it is that strategically we need to regenerate on it. And free ports, for instance, the sort of, I think it's something like 18 or 20 we had in Europe for the last few years, the 5 that we had in the UK until 2012. All right, they played tactical short-term gains that we need to do. The one that we were involved in Tangiers, very significant. But actually, what it led to was fairly low-cost wage reward jobs in that short term. Perfectly right as a tactic, but strategically, economically, not that significant. When we get on to these issues about reshoring, we have to work out what is the significance in the value add layers to ensure that we prioritize the ones that we want to go for, that will address the future generation carbon issues that we have, rather than just the short-term tactics on creating a few extra jobs. As important as that might seem today, we have to ensure that we get reward on jobs at a higher level.
Thank you, James. Yeah, well put together, that response. Thank you. Conscious time is rapidly running out, but I want to address Tracy's question, if we can, in just a couple of minutes. Tracy's question: as of July the 1st, can you clarify that, say, for shipments to Netherlands or France, Spain, for example, will definitely need a cert of origin, ? At the moment, I'm not doing these unless asked for them, or is this not agreed yet? Richard, that may be one in your direction, I think.
It is, and I was just literally typing a reply.
Good man.
The answer is, Tracy, that the production of a certificate of origin is not required until the 1st of January 2022. For the rest of this year, it is recommended that you ensure that your suppliers provide you with evidence of the origin of their products that you receive. From the 1st of January next year, you will be required to have with your exports certification and the stated certification document, which you can find in the Trade and Cooperation Agreement. That document is required for goods export from the UK, and also for that document to be held on file if required to be presented to market surveillance authorities. It will also be necessary probably for your exporters to have that evidence of it as well. So this year is about preparation, but certainly from the 1st of January next year, you will have to show and have available that proof of origin document for any export that you're doing.
Perfectly summed up. Thanks very much, Richard. It's now time for me to wrap this session up. I think we could have gone on for much longer. It just shows the interest and the right interest in what we're discussing here. And I dare say, you know, we probably want to have a review, almost another session in a few months' time, just to see how things are and if they're on track, because this is such an important topic. So if I may, before I hand back to you, Janice, I'd like to thank the panel, Ed, James, Chris, Richard, Dickie, for taking part in this. Thank you for your presentations. Thank you for your answers to the questions. To the audience, thank you for participating in this event. Really great to see so many people here today. I say here today, of course, we live in a virtual world, but to see you all on screen. So thanks very much for participating. So Janice, over to you to conclude. Thank you.
Oh, great. Thanks, Tim. And huge thank you to all the panel speakers for your contributions today. Diolch yn fawr iawn. By way of recap, today we heard from Ed Sheriff, who is Welsh Government Deputy Director of EU Transition, and Ed detailed the transition plan that the Welsh Government had in place prior to the end of 2020 and how they planned to manage the arrangements once the new deal began on the 1st of January, and of course the areas of focus today. We then heard from James Davis, CEO of Industry Wales, who gave an industry perspective, concentrating on the three specific areas: short-term, long-term and structural matters. I'm sure many of you will resonate with that. Chris Yalsley, Policy Manager of Logistics UK, looked at how the new arrangements have affected transport and logistics, especially between Wales and Ireland. And then our own Richard Rumbelow, Director of International Affairs and Export Services for Make UK, who touched on rules of origin, CE marking, labelling, contracts, changes in business travel. He literally just touched on a lot of subject areas there. And then Dickie Davis, Welsh Government Deputy Director for Industrial Transformation, who gave an insight into the direction of Welsh activity via the Economic Resilience and Reconstruction Plan. And also a big thank you to Tim Williams, former CEO of Welsh Automotive Forum, for chairing and for your contributions, Tim. And I got a personal thanks to my colleague Stephen Tulip, who organised the back end and the slides, etc. I believe we addressed most of the questions. Any unanswered will be dealt with and sent out in the next few days. And if you have any further questions following this, please email me. I put my email address in the chat box, but I will be sending out the recording, so you'll have my contact details then anyway. As you can see here today, there's a lot of support available across a number of organisations. So please reach out to myself or any of my colleagues here. We're here to support you. That's what we do. And with that, I bring the session to an end. If I could ask the speakers to stay on, please. So thank you for your company this afternoon. Diolch yn fawr iawn i chi, Cymru, and thank you.